Euntaek has just played a verse for us of Amazing Grace, number 671 in our blue hymnal. It is perhaps the hymn that has had the most meaning for Episcopalians over the last 50 years. I would say before that it was, O God, our help in ages past, which I will talk about on another day. Amazing Grace has never been my favorite hymn, I will say, because I am not comfortable with its backstory. It's one of two popular hymns in our hymnal, written by John Newton. He was an evangelical preacher. He built his own church in London, which is still there. It's a very imposing edifice, and he packed people in. But before he did that, he packed slaves into a slave ship because he was a slave ship captain for many years. And he made an enormous amount of money doing that. And he had a religious conversion experience, which led to his writing this hymn about how he was giving up the former things that he was doing. What makes me uncomfortable about Newton, because he has a great story of someone who has this really amendment of life, finds a new purpose, is full of the grace and glory of God, is that after he has his conversion, he is a slave ship captain for 9 more years. He didn't stop until he felt he had enough money. This is very difficult for me to comprehend. The slave trading business was awful beyond all belief. My favorite painting from the 19th century is J.M.W. Turner's painting about a slave ship that is sinking. And it is a horrible thing. You see the slaves being drowned, literally, in the painting. It is gruesome. It was a regular practice, though, of captains of slave ships to drown their cargo. Anyone who was sick near the end of the voyage got drowned because they were covered by insurance. They were worth more dead than alive, in other words. So this is a practice that Newton engaged in also. He's drowned live people for his own financial benefit. I would say probably that no one listening to me or listening to this will have ever done anything that is quite that awful. But we all have done things that are awful. We all need an amendment of life. We all need the grace and glory of God. And Newton is a great example to us of someone who changed their life. He was not able to give up the trappings of being a rich person, even as a member of the clergy, of course, building his own church. He was making a claim to be kind of like the television evangelists of today, someone who saw the church as a way to also make a good living, maybe a much better living than they could doing anything else. However, you have to be filled with the grace and glory of God to do what he did in this hymn. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. So many of us are blind. None of us, as I said, have done anything like Newton has done, yet we can be as blind as he was. We often are. We often don't understand that, as Jesus said, we don't take the speck out of our brother's eye until we've removed the mote from our own eye. And this is true for us all the days of our life. We are wretches. When we say that often, we don't really mean it, but we are. We're people who have fallen short of the glory of God. We have fallen short of the glory of God. It is always there for us. God always wants us to be filled with his grace and glory. And yet we put God off. We put God off because we want to make a little bit more money. We want to make a little bit more of this. Just 6 more months of doing this. There will be sometime soon, God, when I will be able to pay attention to you. And yet God this very day is paying attention to you. God this very day is paying attention to you. He wants to have a relationship with you. He wants to know how much you are loved, how much he cares, how much you are his worthy child, a child of God, co-equal with Jesus, according to some of the New Testament writers, because we are all, by adoption, children of God. So, Newton goes on to say, he talks about eternal life, talks about the many dangers, toils, and snares to which we have already come. And he says, when we have been with God for 10,000 years, it will be the same as the first day. We'll have just as many days to sing God's praise then as we will at the beginning. It's that beginning that's tough. And Newton shows us how hard it is, and he shows us how to receive grace and glory. We can be filled with it if we walk into his hymn, if we embrace this hymn in our life. We can be people who are saved solely by the theology here. He does such a great thing for us. I was so negative about him, but who but someone who has been touched by God, and God has reached out his own hand and touched Newton on the shoulder and said, "This is what I want you to do." And how magnificently he's done it. And now I'll ask Euntaek to play the melody again, and I will bid you goodbye. Thank you.